more of a calling also, not only work, but also a calling for us. For my own part, my grandfather passed away in Alzheimer's disease, which is our main focus, but we obviously work within Parkinson's disease, ALS, and other things as well. So with that said, I'm very engaged. I might keep on talking and talking and talking, so at some point you'll have to drag me off stage, probably. We're listed on Stockholm Nasdaq, and this is our disclaimer. And we'll move on. So, BioArctic, we like to think of ourselves as a sort of a unique Swedish biopharma company. And we're unique in the sense, in very many places, in very many ways, but if you put it together, we work in areas of high unmet medical need, where there's a large commercial opportunity. Alzheimer's disease, I've talked about. Parkinson's disease for another. We have a very, very skilled research organization. We started as an idea by Professor Lars Landfelt at Uppsala University that then grew into a company. And since then, science has really been the focus of our company. It's still very much the focus of our company. We've evolved during these 20 years. We've been a company from a pure research organization to also become a research and development organization. And now, thanks to recent events, we're also turning into a research, development, and commercial organization. So we're on a journey, but it's all based on science, and we have very skilled scientists. We're also fortunate to be in a field where a lot of people want to join us. So we see, and have seen the last couple of years, that we attract talent from many different nationalities and from many different parts of the world, or Swedes that have been abroad, moving back to Sweden and want to have a cool job within science, then they contact us. But I think today we have about 18 nationalities in a company of 70 people. We have a project portfolio that's not focused on only one thing. We're not a one-trick pony, and you'll see that too. I'll show you the development portfolio. And which is the most unique thing, we're a company who have no sales, never had any sales, and still we've got a lot of cash to finance our activities. And that's all based on successful partnerships historically. And really from the start of the company, or just 2 years after the start of the company was founded in 2003. And in 2005, a research collaboration was initiated with a company called Eisai, a Japanese pharmaceutical company, very skilled within the neurology field. And then 2 years later, 2007, they took a license on what was then called BAN 2401, and which is now called lecanemab, and brought that in to the clinical stages and just recently presented top-line results for the phase 3 study. So this is our product portfolio, or project portfolio, I should say, not product portfolio, project portfolio. As you can see, it's very heavily, Alzheimer's disease is the largest area for us. We have the lecanemab project out-licensed to Eisai within Alzheimer's disease. They also have a license for a backup compound that's currently on hold, but they also have that license. It's currently in 2 phase 3 studies. One just read out top line, but it's continuing as an OLE study, so open label extension study. And that's the Clarity 80 study. And then they also started 2 years ago a study with lecanemab in preclinical Alzheimer's disease. And that means that they search for participants who have not yet developed symptoms of the disease, but when you examine them and examine their brains, you can see that they're starting to build what's called amyloid beta, a protein that aggregates in the brain before you develop symptoms. And that protein starts aggregating in your brain maybe 15, 20 years before you develop symptoms of the disease. So they're now searching for people who have not yet developed the disease, but trying to then give them a low dose of lecanemab in advance to see if that could even reduce the clinical decline further, or maybe even stop the disease. Very interesting. That's still many years to go before any conclusions are given there, but still it's a phase 3 study. Then we have 5 internal projects, fully owned. So all other projects, apart from lecanemab and the backup compound, all our other projects are fully owned by us with no other involvement. And we've got 5 projects in Alzheimer's disease, looking at genetic factors, looking at other forms of amyloid beta and other things, and also combined with what we call our brain transporter technology platform, which is a way of bringing the antibodies. We develop antibodies to attack these aggregated proteins in the brain. And the brain transporter is a way of bringing these antibodies over the blood-brain barrier into the brain. Because current way, if you look at lecanemab now, and other antibodies that are used for brain diseases, only about 0.3% or up to 1% of the antibodies that you inject in your body actually reach the brain where they're supposed to treat the disease. The rest won't come over the blood-brain barrier. So by trying to develop a technology to specifically transport these proteins, these antibodies, into the brain, we can get, hopefully, higher concentration into the brain, meaning better efficacy and lower doses, which is good for adverse events and side effects, for example. But also from a production perspective, because if you just calculate how much of these antibodies is needed, and you look at the population who have these diseases globally, it's going to be difficult to produce, all of what you need. So if you can develop a technology to also reduce what you need to inject in order to get it into the brain, that's going to help. So we see that actually, that's the bottom project right here. And that's a project by itself. We like to think that could actually be a company of itself because it's such an interesting technology, and we see it as an opportunity to out-license that in multiple external actors or companies that want to bring their protein drugs into the brain for different diseases. It could be cancer, it could be Parkinson's, ALS, what have you. Then we have a Parkinson's disease project that was partnered with AbbVie up until April this year, when they said for strategic reasons that they were backing out of this project. So we've now taken that back and are working now with AbbVie to bring all the data back. And the long-term strategy there is obviously to continue that project, and we're looking at all options, driving it forward ourselves to further increase the value of the project and before partnership, or looking for a partner right away to bring it into phase 2. But phase 1 is done and had good results. So we're very excited. And actually, if you look at that project and look at the underlying data we have from preclinical, it's actually stronger data than we have for lecanemab, which is now proven to be quite the thing. So very excited about that project. And then thirdly, other CNS disorders. That's where we look at lecanemab for other diseases than Alzheimer's disease. As I said, Alzheimer's disease is what's out-licensed to AbbVie. All other indications for lecanemab are ours. So we have the rights to those, so we're looking into different things there. And then we also have an ALS project, which we're looking at separately as the antibody, but then also the antibody together with our brain transporter technology. And that is a very exciting project that's developing quite quickly, actually. So just to circle in on Eisai, which is and have been for a very long time a super important partner for BioArctic. And as I said, the first agreement with Eisai was signed already in 2005, and we've continued to sign different research collaborations or licensing deals with them since then. And we still have research collaboration ongoing with Eisai, where we help them with preclinical investigation of the mechanism of action of lecanemab. So help them understand, how does lecanemab work, why does it work in this way, and et cetera, because that's also important for when they file for approval in different regions, but also to understand mechanistically how it works, to be able to explain that to the people and the doctors that are going to use this with their patients. We still, in the cooperation with Eisai, we've received many million euros, I think, top of my head, around 90 million or so. But we still have up to 136 million euros to receive should the project continue, which we think there's a high likelihood of. And that's linked to regulatory submissions, regulatory approvals, and then sales milestones as it becomes a product on the market. In addition to that, we also have high single-digit royalties based on global sales. And thirdly, we also have retained rights to market lecanemab in the Nordic region. Hence, we're building this Nordic marketing and commercial organization now, and that's going to be done in cooperation with Eisai, is the plan. So just to give you a few highlights then before I dig into lecanemab, this from our Q3 that was presented just Thursday last week. Big news was actually pretty much 4 weeks before that when we came out with the positive top-line results from lecanemab, the Clarity AD phase 3 study, which in essence hit all both secondaries and top primary endpoints. Very happy about that. We haven't seen all the underlying data yet. That's going to be presented at CTAD, which is an international congress in San Francisco this year, and it's on the 29th of November is when the congress starts, and Eisai is already on the first day going to present more underlying data from the study. So we're really looking forward to that to understand the data even better. I should also mention that Eisai has already submitted lecanemab for what's called an accelerator approval. That is based on the phase 2 data, which I'll show you in the next slide. They've already applied earlier this year for approval in the US based on the phase 2 data and based on safety data to be able to get it to patients as quickly as possible and to prepare the market in the US for this hopefully coming drug then. And then, as I said, we're working with AbbVie to take back, and we already have the project back, but also take back all the data that they generated since they became our partner in 2016. So, phase 2 data of lecanemab, and soon we're probably going to go over to just talk about the phase 3 data, but I think it's important to show the phase 2 data because that was a background why we went on, or why Eisai decided to go on to the phase 3 study. And what was seen there was basically 2 things that they were looking at. One was, does this reduce the amyloid burden that you see in the brain of Alzheimer's disease patients? And that is the amyloid PET graph that you have to your left. It's actually my left too, if I look at that screen. So to your left, and those 2 lines, the green and the blue, are the highest and 1 but highest dose groups, because what was also tested in the phase 2 was at what dose should be the one used. And at the end, it was the highest dose, the 10 milligram per kilo. And what they could see then was that they reduced amyloid in the brain extremely efficiently. So you see the number below, it says more than 90% of patients amyloid negative or negative amyloid PET. What does that mean? It means that at that stage, if they would come in as a novel patient to the doctor would say, you do not have Alzheimer's disease because we can't see any amyloid in your brain. You've got a Nevigan. So that's how strong and potent this drug is. 90%, more than 90% of patients were amyloid negative. And then secondly, it looked at different cognitive scales. This is one of them, ADCOMS, which showed about a 30% less decline in the cognitive space. So how fast do these patients deteriorate? Because it's not a cure. You should be very clear about this. At this point, lecanemab or other competitors that are testing, it's not a cure. At this point, it's trying to break the progress of the disease or slow it down as much as you possibly can. So 30%, then we had different cognitive measures. One was 26, one was 30, one was 47. So we like to say around a third, approximately, is what was shown in phase 2b. And what does that mean? Well, it means that over the course of the 18-month study, the patients that get lecanemab, they save 6 months in the earlier stages of the disease. And this is a disease that maybe goes on for 9 years or so. So that means you can save considerable time in the earlier phases of the disease where you can still function and live at home, take care of yourself. And I'll come back to that because Eisai has done a modeling on that based on these results, which I'll show you. But what we could also see was that it was consistent effect across all the different biomarkers and endpoints that were set for the study. So everything pointed in the same direction. So very consistent, strong results. And important note that I was about to forget, good safety profile, safety tolerability profile. Because there's one specific adverse event that's linked to these type of antibody treatments for Alzheimer's disease, and that's something called ARIA-E, which is a brain edema. And in our study in the phase 2b study, around 10% got that. And about a little less than 2% of that was symptoms. So most who got it didn't get symptoms even, but around 2% of the participants got symptoms of area E. If you compare that to competitors, that's around a third or more than a half, and around a third, or even compared to some, more than a third they have of what they have. So they are around area E of between 27 and 35%, with symptoms ranging from 6% and up. So clearly a good safety profile as well.
Oskar, 5 minutes left.
5 minutes left already. Okay. See, I get engaged and I talk. So anyway, the phase 2 was behind why Eisai decided to launch the phase 3. Super simple. Lecanemab versus placebo, 2 similar size cohorts, 1,795 patients. Actually, it was from start was going to be 1,566, but because of COVID, Eisai increased the number of patients because of some patients missing doses during the initial parts of COVID. And then they looked at the primary endpoint was set to CDR Sum of Boxes, which is a cognitive and functional scale that was requested by the authorities to approve this. And also the authorities approved, because of the size of this disease and because of the results from phase 2, that one phase 3 study would be enough. So what were the results that were published recently? Well, we saw that on the primary and all key secondary endpoints, there was highly statistically significant results favoring lecanemab compared to placebo. And for the main, the primary endpoint, we saw 27% reduction in the clinical decline of patients. And we continued to see a relatively low incidence of the area E side effect. So the good thing is this confirmed what we saw in phase 2b. And the statistically significant part is very interesting, because normally you would want to, if you want to say that something's statistically significant, normally for a study, you say you need to have a p-value, which is called, it's the percentage of the likelihood of it being a false positive, so to say. And normally you would say that a p-value of 0.05, that is 1 in 20, that's good. And if you only have one phase 3 study instead of 2, you would like to have a p-value of better than 0.01, that's 1 in 100. Now we had a p-value of 0.00005. That's 1 in 20,000 that these would be false positive results. So very strong and consistent results also in the phase 3, which confirms the phase 2. So this is then what I want to show. What does this mean to patients? So Eisai did a modeling study based on the phase 2 data. Now the phase 3 data is slightly better than phase 2, but it's still in the same range. And it means that if you as a patient have the possibility to get lecanemab, this could mean up to over 3 years of longer time in the earlier stages of the disease where you can still function. And that's a huge gain. If you think of cancer medication, for example, people pay, and governments pay tons to prolong life of cancer patients with a few months. I know, my father has a brain tumor. And that's a few months that you prolong life, right? Here we have the ability to prolong the early stages of disease with over 3 years. This is huge, huge. It's like 1 minute, right? So I still have slides and I'm going to go, okay, I just want to show you the clinical program continues, right? Because not only the phase 3, patients who were in the phase 3 and concluded the phase 3 had the opportunity to continue into an open label extension study, to continue to be on lecanemab, and then everybody gets the lecanemab, also the people on open label extension. And 95% approximately chose to continue to the open label extension study. So that also says something, I think. There's still research going on in China because you need to do that. And the open label extension study for the phase 2b is also ongoing. And then right now, lecanemab is given as an intravenous injection. That is, you need to go to the hospital or have a nurse come home and give you an infusion. Eisai is now also looking at a subcutaneous formulation where you could give it yourself via an injection, sort of like a diabetes patient would do at home. So that's also ongoing. So it's a program. It continues to generate data and will continue for many years to go. And I also talked about the AHEAD study, which is this, where we're looking at pre-symptomatic patients to see if we could further break the disease or even earlier break the disease and maybe even stop it from ever reaching the later stages. Stage 3 is where you start developing clinical symptoms. Stage 1 and 2 is where you build up amyloid in your brain, but you don't have any symptoms. And this is why we think lecanemab is great in one slide. I hope you can get these slides afterwards because I'm not going to be able to go through it. But basically, we think lecanemab will be the basis for a paradigm shift in the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. Up until now, there has been no disease-modifying treatments available for Alzheimer's disease anywhere in the world. Lecanemab is a first. It's the possibility of a real paradigm shift in how you treat patients. So that's really, really cool. And we're going to do this together with our partner Eisai. And should I stop? Because I have more slides too. And